The biggest difference, I guess, that you would find between law courts today and law courts in antiquity is that the proceedings are held in public, and indeed they're held in the open air. So you have to imagine the Roman Forum, the centre of the city, with benches for the jury, for the presiding magistrate, benches for the prosecution, the witness, the defendant, and the defending counsel. All these people have their places, and then around them there's a kind of halo, a crowd of people who just stand around the outside of the court, and they kind of go ooh and ah, and they sort of cheer and they hiss and they boo. One of the things that the orator does is to engage the crowd. It's not simply trying to convince the jury, but it's trying to work the crowd. At one point Cicero talks about how to wrap up a speech in an oratorical treatise, and he says, you know, in winding up the speeches, you've really got to work on the pathos of the crowd. You've got to make them sorry. And I've done tricks like going into the crowd and picking up a baby and then carrying it around while I finish the end of the speech. That tells us, you know, that mother and nursemaids, but among the kind of people, this huge mix of people who come down to watch the courts going on. We've got to remember as well there are other people there. Cicero is one of 3 speakers for the defence. There are normally 3 speakers for the prosecution. We have a slightly weird view of how Roman courts operated because we tend to see it through Cicero's eyes. We don't know very much about what the other speakers said, either the people who were on the team with him, either in this case prosecuting or in the other cases that he did being on the defence. And we have very little idea of what the arguments of the other side were. Sometimes when Cicero is defending, he talks about the other side's arguments, but he's always travestying them, he's always twisting them. It's in his interest to try and make the arguments sound as stupid as possible. And it's this dynamism between the different elements which is really important. Cicero is trying to convince the jury, because at the end of the day, the jury will be asked to vote. They'll put little tickets into an urn, which either say, I acquit, absolvo, or I condemn, condemno, and then they'll be counted up and the guy will be acquitted or condemned. But the jury are watching the audience, and the jury are reacting to the audience. Cicero talks quite a lot in the course of the Verrines about the expectatio populi Romani, what the Roman people want. And we can imagine when he says this, he waves his arm, his toegate arm, around all these people, and the jury are thinking, you know, we're going to make ourselves really unpopular if we don't, if we fly in the face of public opinion. Now that's really important right now, because the Verrines happens against a time of judicial scandal. In the 70s, leading up to the trial, there's been a series of scandalous acquittals where senatorial jurors have acquitted really ghastly types who are clearly guilty, almost certainly because they're being bribed. And there's a danger, actually, as indeed comes to pass, that the senators will lose their control of the courts. And one of the things Cicero tries to do in the Verrines is to say, if you can nail this guy is so obviously guilty, you know, a blind man could find him guilty. If you send him down, you might not have the courts taken away from you. So there's a lot of explicit discussion early on in the text about bribery. There's a lot of explicit discussion about how courts work well and how they don't work well. But one of the things he's doing, trying to paint this lurid picture, such that, like you see in the set text, is to give you a picture of a guy who you cannot fail to send down. You could be blind, deaf, dumb, just come off a spaceship. You cannot fail to find this guy guilty.